there, Vikings fans. Welcome to another episode of Two Old Bloggers right here on Vikings First and SKOL. Even with no playoffs this year, at least for us, we got some later this afternoon to watch. The offseason drama is heating up and heating up fast. Jordan Addison got all his charges dropped. Dodged a bullet. But trade rumors are firing and firing fast, especially with the 49ers. Brian Flores locked in with an extension, at least for now. But is he the key to turning the defense around or keeping it at top 5? Or the next head coach if things go south? We're losing the NFC North battle in the QB arms race. Badly. There's Goff. There's Love. There's Williams. And they're all thriving while we have J.J. McCarthy with historic lows when he actually plays. Don't miss our deep dive on fixing the offensive line. That's right. Does it need it? Well, it does, at least most likely in one spot. Who's our center for 2026? And can the big guys stay healthy? Darren and I are breaking it all down. No holds barred. Let's get into it on today's Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. And we're here. How you doing, Darren?
Oh, just great, Dave. Nice Sunday morning and ready to watch some football later on today. Who do you got in the games, by the way?
Oh, for the AFC game, I've got the Pats, and for the NFC game, I'm going to root for Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I kind of feel how that's going to roll too. I'm not really buying the whole Jarrett Stidham's going to be fine. News that stuff that I've been reading this week. So we'll see how it all goes. I think that one might not end up being very close. Denver's defense is going to have to really, really, really play well to keep them in the game, I think.
Mm-hmm. And for half the U.S., they've got blanketed by our first snowmageddon of the year. It's clearing out here in the St. Louis area. We got about 8 inches of powdery snow. When you go further south, it gets worse and east. And there a bunch of people had ice, which causes power issues. Luckily, nothing affected the power here, but keep my fingers crossed, knock on wood, it stays that way.
Yes. You get a sudden change in temperature. It could turn all that snow into ice, and then you got...
Well, it's got to warm up first. And The one thing about this is you guys left the door open upstairs, and all that cold air has moved in right behind it.
Hey, what can I say, man? It happens.
All right. Might as well get this started, and we're starting off a little bit different. We're starting off with This Week in Vikings Land. And like I said, we'll get to...
Dave's so used to it being the second or third theme, he's slow.
I know. It's crazy. This Week in Vikings Land.
Yeah. And it's like you said in the intro, Dave, Vikings are out of the playoffs, but another it's been a busy week for the Vikings as far as news goes. And that wanted to get with the Jordan Addison news first. Found out on Tuesday that the misdemeanor trespassing charges had been dropped by the Florida authorities. And so that that's good news for Jordan Addison, perhaps good news for the Vikings, because even if this had gone to trial, and however long it took, even if Addison had been had been cleared, it seemed like the chances were pretty good that the NFL was going to drop some sort of suspension on him, and that it would be more than the 3 games he got last year, at the start of last year, for that wet, reckless driving charge that he ended up agreeing to. And not great, because then, of course, there could be a sizable amount of the season that he would, again, not be available to the Vikings for. In a very, I think, critical season for Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and the Vikings organization in general. And that's even assuming that the Vikings would keep him if he were to get suspended for the second time by the NFL. So it looks like the Vikings and Addison have dodged a bullet there, because what I was reading, even though, Dave, as we know, the NFL, it could still levy some sort of discipline to Jordan Addison. It's on their discretion to do so, or even if the Florida charges have been dropped. But what I was reading from various people who cover the Vikings and cover the NFL is that they thought that with the Florida prosecutors basically saying, well, nothing to see here after all, and that maybe the Tampa casino staff were a little bit overzealous in their actions on Addison, or not, that the prevailing view seemed to be that the NFL wasn't going to jump in here and levy any kind of suspension for Addison based on what's happened. So that's good for Addison. But, it does make you wonder, still wonder about whether the Vikings, even though Addison's probably not going to face suspension, remember there's still a lot of offseason left and still a lot of time for Addison to do something dumb again.
Hopefully, knock on wood, he won't.
Hopefully he won't. But again, many months, many weeks to go before he gets busy with football activities. We shall see on that. And you do wonder, with his past off the field history in Minnesota, whether the Vikings have lost faith in him being able to avoid getting in situations like this, where a suspension and his availability is even a question on Sundays. So that's something that we'll see how things go in the offseason. I do think, however it goes, for Jordan Addison, I think this latest incident, even though I feel like he has to reconsider his relationship with alcohol, I think, considering what has happened in the past. Now, I'm not trying to preach here. When I was 23, did I have some nights where I drank a lot and maybe don't remember what I did? Yes.
Thank you very much, Davey, for the $2 super chat.
Yeah. Yes, Davey, for sure. But the other thing is, like, when I was 23, I wasn't a professional football player, and I think that there's a lot of money at stake here for Jordan Addison. The NFL does not, and pro sports leagues in general, do not take kindly anymore to their players showing up regularly, getting mugshots with orange jumpsuits, wearing orange jumpsuits, and that leads to suspensions and a loss of and fines and it impacts your future earnings. So I think, at some point in here, I'm wondering when Addison or his team just decide that, I got to straighten things. I got to change some things here for my future career. But as of right now, again, it looks like he's dodged a bullet. But I think that there's a larger question for him that he has to ask, and the people who are close to him have to ask him about how to avoid getting in these situations. And a lot of them seem to involve alcohol.
Well, they've always had, him under Justin Jefferson's wing. You've got the coaches are trying to influence him. The whole works. I just wonder if it's a lack of discipline on his part, which very well could be. But hey, it is what it is. That leads us to our next topic of, could we trade Jordan Addison?
Well, yeah, because last week when I which is when these charges were still, Addison was still facing them. They hadn't been dropped. At that point, we talked about it on the show. I said that I thought that Addison had played his last game with the Vikings. Well, now with the charges being dropped and suspension unlikely, if he stays, keeps his nose clean for the rest of the offseason, does that change my tune on this? I think it does a bit, because we know Addison's been a very productive player for the Vikings, at least his first 2 seasons. Last year was a down year, but I think most of that was not his fault. But nonetheless, it was a down year for him. But he's been a very valuable player and productive player for the Vikings and the offense. And I think because of that, and because of the fact that they picked him in the first round at 23 and in 2023, I think the Vikings would like to see things through with Addison and keep him on the team if it's possible. And the fact that he's not going to probably face suspension now, and these charges have been dropped and may have been much ado about something, but not as serious as we might have thought. And knowing that Addison can help you in 2026 in getting the offense to be much, much better than it was last year. And he's going to help any quarterback the Vikings get who's going to be the starter next year. So I think those things may cause the Vikings to think, well, let's see, let's keep him for this year and see where it goes. But interesting though, like you said,
they have till May to make the decision on the 5th-year option.
But this week, Will Ragatz from Sports Illustrated, who covers the Vikings, he had picked up on something that a guy named Grant Kahn, who covers the 49ers for Sports Illustrated as well, Kahn had posted a video where he said that a source has told him that the San Francisco 49ers are going to be very aggressive using trades this offseason and in the draft, and they're going to be very aggressive in adding a wide receiver via the trade. And the wide receiver, he says this source has told him that the 49ers are targeting is Jordan Addison.
Now, he didn't mention Justin Jefferson, but he knows that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. But the Jordan Addison thing, by the way, Kahn also said that the Bills are interested in Jordan Addison, and the Bills need a wide receiver too. But when you look at this, Dave, I don't know how plugged in Kahn is with the 49ers. We have no idea who his source is and where and what their agenda is and how deep they are with the 49ers organization. But when you look at it, it does make sense from the 49ers perspective. They need a guy who could be potentially a number 1 wide receiver, because Brandon Ayuk is not playing for them anymore. He is finished with the 49ers, and they need to find somebody who could replace him. Jordan Addison has the talent to do that. Even though he's never been a number 1 wide receiver in Minnesota, because Justin Jefferson is there. So it makes sense for them. Plus, Addison this year would be a very cheap number 1 guy if you got him. So it makes sense from them. From Addison's perspective, it would also make sense, I think, because if he were to get traded to a place like San Francisco, well, he's got a chance to establish himself as a number 1 wide receiver. He's not going to be in the shadow of Justin Jefferson anymore. And if he could establish himself as a number 1 with another team and have the production to go with that, that would make his next contract a lot more lucrative for him. I think also he'd get a chance to work under Kyle Shanahan in an offense. And I think that would be very, that's something that would be appealing to a lot of young wide receivers. He'd also be catching passes, hopefully, if he stays healthy, from Brock Purdy. I think that would be very appealing to a wide receiver like Jordan Addison after considering what might be facing him in 2026. Right now, J.J. McCarthy is the guy who would be your starter. We know there's going to be some competition for that, but the quarterback situation with the Vikings is quite unsettled, which we'll talk about in a bit. And also the whole fresh start thing for Addison. With the off-the-field issues he's had in Minnesota, a lot of fans aren't too pleased with Addison right now. Going to to the 49ers, a different organization. He gets a clean slate, fresh start there. And also going to San Francisco, even though it's Northern California, Dave, it's still California. And he would be going back to that state where he played his last year of college ball at USC. So a lot of things there that, make the match seem to make sense, but it has to make sense for the Vikings. and Khan in his video also said that the two teams have had some discussions about this, but I don't know if the Vikings are going to go there, but we're starting to get some noise about this, and I just have a gut feeling that even though Addison's his legal issues right for now have been resolved, I don't think his future with the Vikings has been resolved. And I think that I do have a feeling that he is not going to be a Viking when we get to 2026.
He may not. He's not the only one that's supposedly, according to Khan, looking for him. The Buffalo Bills have also inquired as well. And they could use him without a doubt.
Yes, definitely, especially with the way the owner and Brandon Beane threw Keon Coleman under the bus in their press conference.
Yeah, it was a big ka-tunk as he went under the bus. You got that right. Yeah. But it's always good to have multiple teams interested because that bids up the price. Who knows? We may even get a first back for him.
Yeah. And how do you feel about that, Dave, as far as like if we were to trade Addison and we got fair value for him, whatever you consider fair value?
Well, a minimum would be, I would think, a second rounder. Mm-hmm. We talked about it earlier this week. You could grab one of the guys off of San Francisco, and drop the price. Who knows? But we drafted him in the first round. He is going to get a second contract somewhere because he's a first rounder. And he obviously has talent when it comes to the football field. It's just his undisciplined actions off the field that have cost him. And it will cost him in his next negotiation, no matter what, if it's with Minnesota or wherever it's at. So,
I think there was a comment in our last show, in the comment section of our last show, when it got posted on YouTube. Somebody was suggesting a Mac Jones for Addison kind of trade. Again, that's just spitballing there, but that did get thrown out by Cone right. as well as like a Ricky Pearsall and a fourth for Addison, right. That sort of thing. So again, this is all speculation, but like we always say, Dave, where there's a little smoke, there's usually a little fire, right? And
that's right. And it may be burning for centuries underneath the ground, but yes, just like so well up there in the Northwest Territories.
Sure do.
All right. The next part of what happened this week turned into be actually very good news for Vikings fans.
Sure was. And that, of course, was the announcement on Wednesday, I think it was, Brian Flores signing an extension with the Vikings. We as usual, we didn't find out how many years, what the terms were. Tom Pelissero mentioned, though, that the Vikings gave Flores a deal that he basically could not refuse, and that it was very, very lucrative. He's likely right up there with the top coordinators as far as salary goes.
I bet he's the top coordinator when it comes all out.
So that's great. And I don't care anymore like why he didn't sign earlier. It appears that he was testing the market, and maybe there were some things organizationally that he wanted to get straightened out more. I think Pelissero also mentioned that he likely, correct me on this, Dave, that the Vikings have given him basically the say over defensive personnel and acquiring that sort of thing, which I think was pretty important for him.
I think that's the case. I don't know if it's true. We haven't heard anything about that yet. We may find out when it comes to free agency and the draft.
Right, yeah. But clearly a big deal now. It's still not 100% that he will be back, I guess, because the Vikings, when they announced the extension, they also had to add in there the caveat that will be back unless he gets a head coaching job somewhere else this offseason. But that's looking like it's not going to happen. He's only had interviews with 2 teams, the Ravens and the Steelers, as far as I'm aware. And both of those teams this week decided on chose somebody else. Jesse Minter is the Chargers defensive coordinator, is going to Baltimore. And we learned yesterday that Mike McCarthy has taken the job with Pittsburgh. And Dave, you and I were doing virtual high fives when we
Yes.
when we saw this news.
I think this is funny. But okay, Mike McCarthy is a good salesman. Sold himself on developing quarterbacks. Okay.
Yeah.
And Pittsburgh's just like us. They need to develop a legitimate franchise quarterback.
They do. And so with Flores not getting these 2 jobs, I don't think he's received an interview, or the Bills have not requested an interview with him, and none of the other teams he's been mentioned at all. So it looks pretty good, like he's going to be back with the Vikings in 2026. And I think, and I'm pretty sure you agree with this, Dave, that it was critical that the Vikings got Brian Flores back as the defensive coordinator for 2026, so this defense can continue to, the defense can continue to perform like it has, particularly the last 2 years, where it's been a top 5 unit in points given up, and top 5, top 10, and all kinds of different defensive categories, whether it's DVOA or EPA, expected, all of that stuff. Flores has done an excellent job, and it's great to have him back in the fold. It looks like we're 99.9% sure he'll be back. So that is great. I think there's another reason why I think it's great, though, that he's back, Dave, is if he's on the staff, let's looking at the crystal ball here, but going into 2026, we do not want this to happen. But let's say the Vikings, the year doesn't go very well. Let's say the Vikings miss the playoffs. The season goes south. That would be 3 of the last 4 seasons under Kevin O'Connell that the Vikings would have not made the playoffs in a division in the NFC North that just keeps on getting tougher. That would, and especially again, if the Vikings offense is really the big reason why they don't get into the playoffs, which is what happened this year, Kevin O'Connell might not be the head coach in 2027, or, he might even get canned mid-season if things go really bad. And if that happens, well, who do you have on the staff who could step in there and be the next guy? I already know there's people on this chat and all over Vikings land who think Brian Flores is the better coach than Kevin O'Connell. So if O'Connell in some way were not to return in 2027, again, you've got a guy you can turn to. Potentially, he's right there on your staff. You know him. He's been in the building for 4 years. You could make Brian Flores your head coach. Now that, of course, that's if the Wilfs are ready to break rank with the rest of the NFL owners and hire Flores as head coach when it's clear that there's a embargo on Flores to be a head coach across the NFL. But, I like this as having him as the potential guy to slide in case Kevin O'Connell is not back next year. Now that's doomsday scenario by me, and people know that I do that often, but I think Brian Flores is a nice chip to have on your staff where as a potential head coach to replace Kevin O'Connell if it comes to that.
Well, it's going to be interesting to find out whether he got a assistant head coach title slapped on along with defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. And it was somebody said he had some issues with other coaches. It was Grandizer. Yes, obviously with Mike Pettin, who retired. He was interviewed this week, and he did not have nice things to say about B-Flow. He elected not to. He says, I'm going to take the high road and not say anything. But he obviously didn't. And then we also learned yesterday that defensive line coach Marcus Dixon's contract expired at the end of the season. And he is going for an interview with the Tennessee to be their possible DC. So that's a good thing for Dixon. Now, we'll find out if there is smoke that he only wants, guys that he wants. I can understand that to an extent, but we'll see. It's interesting. But the players on the defensive side love him. So
yes, and he gets results. So if you're gonna, and like you mentioned, Dave Pettin was a guy who was there before Brian Flores came in. That was a Kevin O'Connell choice, not a Brian Flores choice. And Flores made his choice, and the Vikings made their choice on who they want to keep.
Mm-hmm. And Two Evil says, considering what Tua said about B-Flow, if he takes over head coach, JJ is doomed. Well, if he takes over head coach, it's because the offense is failing, and I'm sure JJ will be a part of that. So
yes,
I don't think you can put both together, but yes, they would both fall into that. So, hey, now we got one more topic on this week, and it's about salary cap and comp picks.
Yeah, because the Over the Cap, which is a fantastic website where you can find all kinds of stuff about salary cap and contracts and all of that in the NFL. They had a blog post this week where they did a projection into the compensation picks that each NFL team they think is going to get for the 2026 draft. And they've got the Vikings projected to get one comp pick. It'll be the top comp pick overall, the first one of the comp, the top one in the third, the end of the third round. They get that because they lost Sam Darnold, and he signed with Seattle, but no other comp picks. And that was interesting to me because when the season started, there was talk that the Vikings might get 3 comp picks. They get one because Daniel Jones signed with the Indianapolis Colts, and the talk was the Vikings might get a 4th rounder comp pick because of Jones. And then with a combination of Cam Robinson signing initially with the Texans, and then Trent Sherfield signing with the Broncos, and Johnny Muntcake signing with the Jaguars, depending on their playing time, it was thought that the Vikings might get 1 7th rounder as well out of some combination of those. Now, folks here probably are aware that the way the NFL decides on who gets comp picks and don't is kind of complicated and something that is difficult. We're not going to dive into here and explain.
It's a secret recipe, like KFC's, herbs and spices. They're not going to let us know.
But it's based on some they throw it into the menu, and it's a combination looking at who you lost in free agency, who you signed in free agency, what the value of those contracts were, and also the playing time that these various people get. And so based on that, again, over the cap, these are just projections, but again, they're just saying they don't think we're going to get a comp for Daniel Jones. And Sherfield didn't end up playing very much with the Broncos. Munt barely played with the Jaguars, and then Robinson lost his starting job with the Texans, and then he got traded to the Browns. And Eric Wilson figures in prominently in this comp pick projection because he had such a great season, became a starter, ended up playing well over almost 95% of the defensive snaps or something like that. And he was initially supposed to be a depth guy and a special teams guy and not playing very much, but he ends up potentially canceling out those, the Robinson, Sherfield, Daniel Jones, all that stuff. Now, the over the cap isn't sure yet whether Wilson qualifies as a comp pick, but if he does, he will cancel out Daniel Jones, and the Vikings won't get a comp pick for Jones signing with the Colts. But if it doesn't, if Wilson doesn't qualify, and I feel like he will based on how much he played this year, the over the cap does project that if that does happen and Wilson does not qualify as a comp pick, then the Vikings will get Jones a 5th round compensation pick for Daniel Jones, not a 4th. But right now it looks like we're just getting 1. The Vikings currently have 8 draft picks that they know they have right now. They got a 1st, a 2nd, a 3rd, a 5th, a 6th, and 3 7ths. This 3rd comp pick, which is pretty much guaranteed that they'll get, will give them 9 and 4 in the top 100 picks, which is a better situation than the Vikings have had in the past 3 drafts, where they have had like 1 or 2 picks in the top 100. So, again, we're getting a comp pick, not getting as many as we thought, but one's better than none. And if you're curious, it's the Steelers and the Ravens are going to get the most comp picks according to Over the Cap. They're projecting each team will get 4 comp picks, which is quite a lot.
Interesting. We'll have to see how it plays out and how Quasi or whomever's got the power over the draft works it out this year.
Oh, yeah. What? But Dave, does it matter how many comp picks or draft picks we get? Because Quasi can't draft, right?
Well, that may be why this man supposedly, allegedly, asked for power of the defensive selections. So we'll see. Now on to theme 2. This one, we're talking about the arms race in the NFC North. In particular,
we sure are.
The QB arms race. But I loved this picture. It was great.
Last week we talked, Dave, quarterbacks, like how often do you think we talk about quarterbacks on the show? Like
just about every week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the most important position in football.
It is. So last week we talked about it again. It had to do with the Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's end of season press conferences that they held, and them talking and how they both did not commit to JJ McCarthy being the starter for the Vikings in 2026. But what I forgot to mention in that segment, and I had planned on it, was that that whole thing about having a competitive, building a competitive quarterback room in 2026. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, clearly they recognize that they've got to get the Vikings quarterback situation much improved in 2026, or they might not have jobs in 2027. And the reason that they realize that is because they also realize that in the NFC North, they are losing the arms race right now and losing it badly. You just look around at the other 3 teams in the NFC North and their quarterbacks right now. In Detroit, you got Jared Goff. Yeah, he had trouble with Brian Flores' defense this year, but in the last 4 seasons with the Detroit Lions, or is it the last 3? Anyway, last 3 or 4 seasons, he's never thrown less than 4,400 yards. He's never thrown less than 29 touchdowns in a season. He's never completed less than 65% of his passes. That's a pretty good quarterbacking right there. Jordan Love, okay, maybe he's not in the top 5 in the league or potentially or anything like that, but in his 3 seasons as a starter, and he's missed some games during that time, he's never thrown less than 23 touchdown passes, never thrown less than 3,300 yards in a season. He's mobile. He doesn't get sacked very much, doesn't turn the ball over very much. He's developed into a pretty good quarterback for the Packers. Not Aaron Rodgers' level, not Brett Favre level yet, but still, pretty good quarterback. And then in Chicago, Caleb Williams. His rookie season had some struggles for sure, but he improved on that, cut way down on the sacks. He's always been, in his 2 seasons, he's shown an ability that he doesn't turn the ball over very much. Makes these highlight reel plays when nothing should be happening, when disaster strikes. He got the Bears in a situation where they won the NFC North this year and won a playoff game. The Vikings have yet to win a playoff game under Kevin O'Connell. This year he came within 58 yards of being the first Bears quarterback in franchise history, which is, how long does that span?
100 plus years, yeah.
Yeah, to throw 4,000 yards. So he really took, a step forward in 2025 compared to 2024. He's looking like, unfortunately, he might be a potential star in the NFL. So that's your 3 other teams in the NFC North. Then you look at Minnesota, JJ McCarthy. Well, his second year in the league, his first year as a starter, a lot of struggles. We've talked about them ad nauseum on this show. He played at a standard that is just is not going to allow you to win consistently in the NFL. And with the other quarterbacks in the NFC North, he played at a standard that's going to lead the Vikings to being in the basement of the NFC North if they don't get much improvement there. So,
and you notice none of the offensive staff besides Chris Cooper, we've heard been released.
That's true.
Keith Carter in that as well, but you still have McCown as his QB coach. You have Wes Phillips as the OC. Stuff that will affect J.J. McCarthy is all still in place.
Yes, those guys are still there, and you said before, Dave, that you think that the loss of Grant Udinski was a big blow to McCarthy and the Vikings quarterbacks in general. And the Jacksonville Jaguars had a pretty successful season this year, particularly on offense. So might be something there too. But with McCarthy, really, for him to get to where the other three quarterbacks in the NFC North are, Dave, he's going to have to improve massively in 2026 to get to that level. And, I just don't know if it's going to be there. So a lot of questions there with the quarterback position. The Vikings don't have very good answers for it right now, but that's why, again, Kevin O'Connell has talked about in his end of season presser about that quarterback room and how they've got to build it out. And that's why the Vikings are going to bring in some veteran to compete with JJ McCarthy for the starter position in 2026. We don't know what it is, but what's a bit depressing to me about this situation, Dave, is that we're looking to bring in a veteran. We're looking to increase the talent in the quarterback room in 2026. But right now, when I'm looking at it, the choices the Vikings have to make to improve that aren't as good as they were in 2025. At that point in time, we had the option to run it back with Sam Darnold if we chose, potentially franchise him. And Sam Darnold was coming off a Pro Bowl season with the Vikings.
It would have taken franchising him. Yes.
Yeah.
And we all thought that was stupid at the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that was an option for the Vikings. Mm-hmm. They had the option, when you looked at J.J. McCarthy, myself in particular, I was pretty pumped about his potential after what I had heard from training camp and how he had performed and how he was, really putting up a fight with Sam Darnold for the starting job, how he played in that short preseason game against Las Vegas where he did throw an interception, but he bounced back and threw 2 touchdown passes. I felt really enthused that he might be the guy. And then you had Daniel Jones, even another option in there as well. We had him in the room. He had been a starter in New York, had some good years with the Giants. If he was a guy who you'd bring in to compete with J.J. McCarthy for the starter, that seemed like a pretty good option and situation for the Vikings. Now you look at 2026, Dave. J.J. McCarthy in particular, he's the only one of those three that's still with us. Well, after the way he played this year, I'm not feeling really as good about his potential to be the guy as I was this time last year.
Hey, we both hope he becomes the guy.
Yes, that's right. Hope. But I don't feel nearly as good about it as I did this time last year based on what I saw in 2025. And then you look at the other options, they don't seem to be like, they certainly aren't as appealing as running it back with Sam, what's out there, or even they don't even seem as good as, or obviously better than if we were to have been able to sign Daniel Jones and have him compete with J.J. McCarthy. The way for the Vikings if they want to improve their quarterback situation room at warp speed, well, then you have to trade for one of the big starters, and like Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, who apparently were dissatisfied with their situations in Baltimore and Cincy. But we haven't heard very much about that in the past month, Dave, and I highly doubt that they're going to be traded or available. So I think they're pretty much out of the question. So if they're out of the way, then who are the options for the Vikings to build out the quarterback room? Aaron Rodgers at 43 years old? Do you run it back with hope that the Falcons release Kirk Cousins and Cousins has a second tour with Minnesota? do you trade for Kyler Murray or Mac Jones and give up some assets to bring those guys in? Do you convince Malik Willis that an untested Malik Willis, only 4 NFL starts, I believe. Do you sign him in with and it's going to take a substantial amount of money, I think, to do so, and believe that and promise him the starter job. Anything below that is even less appealing. So, I think options there are not that abundant. I don't think they're all that appealing in a lot of cases. And Dave, you talk about how you hate the fact that the Vikings are often in quarterback purgatory. And I feel that heading into this offseason and trying to come up with some competition for J.J. McCarthy, we are back kind of in quarterback purgatory, unless J.J. McCarthy takes a huge step forward in the offseason and actually does play at a level where he does show that he can be the guy.
I agree. Hopefully he will. I believe in him. Mm-hmm. Norris believes in him. Norris believes that KOC is the problem. I think it's probably not so much KOC as who's in McCarthy's ear all the time. But I think you could develop McCarthy to run the KOC offense just fine. It's just you got to get him the right people to do that. I believe that doesn't exist right now, or wasn't last year. And they bombarded him with too many inputs, too much. Do this, do that, do this. You got 5 people telling him, do this, whatever, versus one that says, no, this is the way we're going. We're going from point A to point B. These are the steps we're going to take, and we're going to work just on those and not everybody throwing in their 2 cents. But and yes, Raymond, he does need to mature some more. He's a young, relatively inexperienced quarterback with lots of talent. So we'll see. Because if we let him go, he'll go on someplace and win Super Bowls with that team. It's just the way our luck rolls. So we'll see.
And if he goes somewhere else, he's also going to have a longer leash there than he has here. You'll have even more time to develop, which may help him.
Too evil to hope. All right. What comes after? We're done with theme 2. Wow, that was a short theme. What comes after theme 2?
Theme 3, buddy.
And this one is my favorite, the O-line.
Going to get into our third edition of looking at the Vikings positions and trying to figure out how they're going to round out this unit and who will be back and who won't be and who they might bring in. Offensive lineman this is a position, Dave, the Vikings don't have a lot of questions at this position, at least 4 of the 5 starters right now. When you look at Brian O'Neill, they know Brian O'Neill and Christian Darrisaw are going to be starting at the tackles, and you know that Will Fries and Donovan Jackson are going to be starting right and left guard, respectively. It's the center position where there's big questions, and that's largely because of Ryan Kelly, of course. If you're just looking purely on the way Kelly played last year when he was on the field, he was excellent. I think 3rd highest rated center in the NFL, according to Pro Football Focus. But of course, the issue with him was he had 3 concussions last year on top of the ones he had previously with Indianapolis. He's probably, we think, going to retire because of those concussions. Even if he doesn't, I don't think you can trust that he's going to be on the field enough and you're going to have to be facing him being out multiple games like he was in 2025. I don't think the Vikings can afford that because of how important the center position is, and the center being the quarterback of the offensive line and often, sorting out protection schemes and all of that sort of stuff. So, and the way the Vikings worked his contract when he signed last year is that he's a prime candidate to be a pre-June 1st release, because yes, there's no guaranteed money with him right in 2026. Yes, if you cut him pre-June the 1st, you do eat $3.3 million in dead cap, but the Vikings would also save $7.8 million in cap space by cutting him before June the 1st. And the Vikings are in a bit of a salary cap pickle right now. So that, he's like an obvious candidate, I think, to be released if he doesn't retire. I don't think he'll be back next year with the Vikings either way. So the Vikings got to do something at center. But at the other four positions, I feel pretty good. Like Brian O'Neill is as steady as they come. As long as he's in the lineup, and he usually is, he's going to give you all pro caliber level play at right tackle. At left guard, Donovan Jackson, I know his Pro Football Focus grade was 59.3 or 59.4, which isn't great, but I felt that he had a strong rookie year, Dave,
especially towards the end of it. But yes,
and his pass protection grades were pretty good by PFF. It was the run grades where he got dinged. But I felt he had a strong rookie year. He wasn't a guy that I noticed that teams were picking on all the time or exposing all the time along the offensive line. And, considering what you say all the time, Dave, about the offensive linemen coming out of college needing 3, sometimes 4 years to really hit their stride at the NFL level, I think that Jackson's first year was very encouraging, very promising, and he's only going to get better. And I think his better is going to be pretty good. So, not worried about him going into 2026. Will Fries, he was a guy who didn't play up to his contract in 2025, but that was kind of predictable because it was a big contract. You'd have to play really, really well to live up to that. But he did play all 17 games along the offensive line, the only starter who did that. And I think with all the different offensive line combinations and guys he was forced to play with this year, and the fact that he was still recovering from a broken leg, I'm expecting him to be a much better player for the Vikings in 2026 because he's a year removed from the surgery for the broken leg. He's used to being in Minnesota now after moving there. He's used to the offensive system. He'll be in hopefully the better health that we hope that the whole starting line, offensive line gets, that there'll be that more continuity and cohesion that'll really make it strong. So I'm expecting him to be much better next season. And then at left tackle with Christian Darrisaw, it's pretty clear now, Dave, I think that Darrisaw came back too early. Whether that was something he pushed for or something the Vikings pushed for, we'll never know, but he certainly came back too early. He was never, I think, 100% healthy. He didn't look right, and that showed in some of his performances in some games, particularly the Green Bay game where he looked terrible in that game at Lambeau. So he's got to get that right knee right. But if he is healthy, Dave, again, just like Brian O'Neill, he's a guy that is going to give you all pro level play at left tackle, and we know how important that is. So I do feel that he's got, he was put on the injured reserve with 4 games left in the season. So I think he got a head start in his rehab and off-season program to build up that strength in that knee. He's got the whole off-season to do it now. I do feel pretty comfortable that he will come back in 2026 and that right knee will be much, much healthier than it was this year. And I think he's going to play at the level we're used to seeing him play. And if he does that, the Vikings offense is going to be much better for it. So is the offensive line. So I feel really good about the 4 of the 5 starters along the offensive line. I think that this has the potential to be a very good offensive line like we thought it was going to be in 2025. And it was at times. But the center thing is a big issue. And what are the Vikings going to do there? Roster-wise, we know Blake Brandel played some center and did okay. Michael Juergens played some center this year, maybe didn't do okay. Are the Vikings comfortable, considering they've invested a lot of resources in the other 4 guys? Are they comfortable with, either running, allowing like Brandel and Juergens to compete for the center job in 2026 and have one of them start. I don't think that they do. That's just me. I think they like Brandel in the role he's in now, where he can be your swing guard as a backup. And he also has shown that if you need him to play tackle in a pinch, or you need him to play center in a pinch, he can do that.
Or guard.
Yeah. But I think he's your swing guard backup for sure. But if you really get hit with injuries and you're like your backup to backup tackle is down, you can throw him in there and he'll do a job for you, same as what he did in center. So I think the Vikings really value his versatility, but I don't think they want him to start as a center. And with Juergens, he had a 2-game audition there at the end of the season at center. I didn't think that he was terrible, but I don't think that the Vikings would be comfortable having him as a starting center either to go into the 2026 season. I think they still think he needs more development, and he's going into his third year. That third year, Dave, maybe he'll get it. But again, he was a 7th-round pick, a long shot. He's probably a guy who would be a backup quality depth guy at best. I just don't think that he's your answer at center right now. I could be proven wrong, but that's how I'm feeling. So if the Vikings don't have an answer at center on the roster, well, they got to go free agency or the draft. You look at free agency and who might be available. The gem of it all would be Tyler Linderbaum, right, from the Ravens. 25 years old, has been their starter since he got there. Was the 4th rated best center in PFF. Obviously, he'd be a great guy to bring in, but I don't see any reason why the Ravens would let him. I don't see them
at the cost he's going to demand.
Yeah, I don't think that he's a guy that the Ravens are going to let get out of the organization. So he's a free agent now, but I think come March, 5th, 6th, or whenever the free agent thing starts, he's not going to be a free agent then.
You got to remember, Linderbaum was drafted as a tackle, and he wants tackle money. And no center gets paid tackle money. And that's where the sticking point is. Do you pay him similar to a top 10 tackle to be, your number one center? And then if Kwesi decides to go that route, which cool, I'm cool with it. Mensah, it just means Kelly's gone. I submit. You've got to figure out all the more extra space in the future, because next year will be next to nothing. It'll be all guarantees. He'll get his cash and he'll be happy. Yeah. But you've got to figure it out over the long term. Now, is he the answer? You said he ranked 4th, right behind Kelly. So I'd love to see him go from one purple team to the other.
Yeah, I don't think that the Ravens are going to let him go though. But we'll see. But
Randy says he's not getting more than 19 or 20 million.
He's an obvious guy you'd think would be a big upgrade, or at least would keep you at the level Kelly was at. Plus, he'd be able to play hopefully the whole 17 games, which Kelly was not able to do. But if Linderbaum isn't available, the 2 other guys that would be the most appealing would be either got Ethan Pocic from who would play with the Browns last year, and then you got Luke Fortner with the Saints. Thing about both of those guys is that they both had sub 70 PFF ratings last year, and Pocic was around 62.2, I think. So free agency, you're always overpaying there. Are those guys going to be a huge upgrade over who you already have in the room, and you're paying them a lot more than you'd be paying Brandel or Juergens?
Pocic, I don't know, would be an absolute power move. You know why? He tore his Achilles on December 7th. He would do nothing for you in 2026.
There you go.
You would have to go, all right, we get him for 2027, and hopefully he's fully healed by then. And that's why it would be, you got to have big cojones to do that. I have no idea if they're going to or not. And the Saints guy, he's on his second team, I believe. I don't know. Keep Kelly. Let Kelly play if he chooses to.
Well, and if he does, that's quite possible they would do that. But those are kind of some free agency options that I think under the Lindenbaum, they're not really appealing to me. So I don't think the Vikings are going to go that route in free agency. So I think the draft is where you got to turn. And in this draft, I don't think that the Vikings would pick a center at 18. After last year, you picked a left guard at 24. But there are some guys that could be in the mix in the second and third round. Now, oftentimes teams don't like to pick centers in the first round at all. This year, a few of the top guys that I'm reading about, and some people will throw out different names, but there's Connor Lew right there from Auburn, Logan Jones from Iowa. Iowa's traditionally produced a lot of very good starting caliber offensive linemen. We haven't heard a whole lot from Iowa linemen the past couple of years, but Logan Jones is one of the guys who's considered a top center out of here. Jake Slaughter from Florida, he's a bit taller than some of these other center prospects. He's around 6'6" and not the 6'2", 6'3" range that these other guys are.
He has a great name for it, though.
Yeah, Slaughter. Yeah, Sergeant Slaughter. And then you got Parker Brailsford from Bama, another guy. And then a fifth guy might not be considered one of the top, but he's got a lot of exposure and got a lot of airtime in this college football season and during the college playoffs is Pat Coogan from Indiana. So I kind of feel that I think that one of these guys is going to be a Viking in the draft, and we're going to select one of these guys. Which one, I don't know. Watch out for who the Vikings bring in on their private visits and their top 30, if any of these guys show up. But I think that the Vikings are going to draft a center this time, and they're going to draft them fairly early, second or third round. And one of these guys is going to be a Viking draftee in 2026. Now, the thing about those guys, of course, Dave, is that, when you're looking at somebody like Fortner, more of he's played at the NFL level. If you're to sign him, you have a better idea what you're going to get from the get-go from somebody like Fortner and certainly somebody like Lindenbaum. If you're picking a college guy, you got to accept that they might take some lumps early in the season, but long-term, you may be getting, a much better player than if you sign Fortner now for big bucks to plug a hole. So that's why I think the Vikings are going to go the draft route with the center position, and those are guys to keep an eye on that I think that, again, one of them they're going to draft. Who it is, I don't know at this point. Nobody does. But I think that's how they're going to address the center situation. As for the other spots, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah talked in his presser about, one of the things that we mentioned last week about him really wanting to build out the offensive line and have guys from your number one to your number 8th or 9th or 10th offensive line, or how many they keep on the roster, that you have a room where if a starter goes out, the 6th or 7th guy down the line can come in and give you quality starter play. He obviously didn't feel the Vikings had that this year. That's something he said he's going to focus on this offseason. Now, every offensive line, every NFL team I don't think is very happy with their offensive line depth, and that's because of the questions about how college is developing offensive linemen now. You're not getting enough quality guys coming in, and that's a problem. But so Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to have a lot of competition to build out that offensive line, but I think depth wise, Brandel's back. I think Juergens is going to be back because they see value in him and they think that he can, they're going to work for him on the third year, and they like his versatility of being able to be either play guard or center. I think Joe Huber will be back. He's only 23. He got a couple of spots. He got in some games this year early in the season. He didn't embarrass himself. I think he's young enough and promising enough that the Vikings would like to use him to you develop him some more and see if he can turn into somebody who can be a quality backup or even maybe a quality starting guard. It's 2 or 3 years down the line. But the guys that probably aren't back are Justin SKOL, your swing tackle du jour that the Vikings signed from outside the organization. And I don't think Walter Rouse is going to be back either. This is this year he was, again, the Vikings didn't dress him any more this year than last year. They clearly weren't comfortable with him being one snap away from being a starter. That's why they didn't dress him most game days. And that shows that they didn't feel that he took a step forward in 2025 compared to 2024. So I think that they're probably done with him and how the Vikings address the depth position at the SKOL Rouse level, your 7th and 8th offensive lineman or your 7th, 8th, and 9th offensive lineman. I think they're going to bring a veteran or two, a veteran guard and a veteran swing left tackle who hasn't really started, but has started a bit in the NFL, but it's not a full-time starter now. Who that is, who the hell knows? And they're going to, I think, particularly at the tackle position, you're going to see them throw a dart with one of those 7th rounders they have right now, or the 6th rounder. And again, pick a really developmental guy that they think has some traits that they can work with. I was hoping that the Vikings might be able to work on getting a good left tackle prospect in maybe the 2nd or 3rd round who might have a bit more starter potential. But I think the center position is such an issue right now that I think that's where they're going to invest their early draft pick on along the offensive line and then do a dart throw on a tackle much later in the draft. And amongst all of this stuff, Dave, what would really help is if you get an offensive line coach who comes in who can develop some of those guys that you pick in the 6th round or 7th round, or and Chris Cooper this week we learned his contract was not renewed. You were very happy about that, and one of the big criticisms you have with Chris Cooper and others had was that he didn't make the guys that he had in the offensive line room better. Ezra Cleveland, Ed Ingram, Dalton Reisner, Garrett Bradbury even. Those are all names we're familiar with. And those are Vidarian Lowe, who's with the Patriots now. These are all guys that Cooper had in his room. They're playing somewhere else now, and in some cases are playing better in those locations than they were here. Why is that? Well, sometimes you can look at the quarterback or the coaching. Got to look at coaching in that situation. And so the next Vikings offensive line coach, I think the Vikings are really going to be looking at, can he bring out the best in the guys that we have, especially the more developmental prospects? And, who is that going to be? Again, we are waiting for that. We do know that one of the names that was mentioned was with Bill Callahan being named as the offensive line coach in Atlanta, that Dwayne Ledford, who people felt did a really good job with the Falcons offensive line the past 2 years, that would he potentially be an option to replace Chris Cooper in Minnesota? Dave, I don't know if you've got any other ideas on who you think might be potential options for the Vikings to replace Chris Cooper, but love to hear them.
I do, and I noticed that my notes, I took the name out. Good. Doogie mentioned Frank Smith as one of them. And so I went up, and I did it earlier in the week, I did it last week, who could replace Cooper? And obviously Callahan was number one, but he's gone already.
Yeah.
If it's Ledford, that's cool. I looked at how many Pro Bowlers, All Pros did these guys have developed underneath them, and where does their offensive lines rank? Frank Smith is basically a stud. He's had a couple first-team All-Pro guys. He's at Pro Bowlers, all sorts of things. He's top 5 in scoring offense, solid in pass protection. He's good, but he's usually towards the bottom when it comes to pass protection. We'll see. Butch Berry. another guy for the 49ers, assistant OL line coach. Whether he has the ability to do it, he's usually medium tier. We'll find out. Pat Meyer, Steelers, bottom. I'm not interested. Dwayne Ledford, yes, I am interested. He's got 3-time Pro Bowlers and 2-time second-team All-Pro Bowlers that he's developed. It's usually top 10 rushing attack, top 15 when it comes to pass. I'm cool with that. It's just, who are we going to get? There's Zach Cromer. His dad was an absolute legend. He's worked with the Rams. He's the assistant O-line coach. The problem is, does he bring anybody like Tyler says with him? Now, he's had some top 10 units. Keith Carter is a no-go, our assistant. He's good at the rushing game, but he's lousy. He's bottom of the barrel when it comes to pass protection. And he has the whole doesn't get along with people stigma along with him. Austin Gunn from the Bills, we'll see if he is. The Bills have had a decent offensive line, top 10, but he has limited exposure, and we'll see what happens there as well. Other than that, there's not much. Now, what frustrates me is, like I talked about earlier, where we had the defensive coach going out for hopefully a DC job at Tennessee. There's staff positions that are open on the Minnesota Vikings. Have we heard anywhere that they're doing interviews with people?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't. What are they waiting on? They don't have to wait on, unless they're looking at the teams that are in the playoff today. They don't have to wait. They can already be interviewing people. And that's what gets me. It just makes me wonder about our present head coach and the whole administration, why we aren't hearing that, hey, Frank Smith has been called. He's got a scheduled appointment on Tuesday. We'll see how this goes. To me, now it could be happening. We're just not hearing about it because crazy people like us that follow the team every day care about it. The common Vikings fan that Vikings Entertainment Network is pointing their content at probably does not care. All they care is, all right, cool, we got a new coach. All right. That's it. How are KOC and JJ McCarthy and Justin Jefferson going to play in 2026? That's what we care about. So, but for guys like us that really, really care, we want to hear it. But hey, Daniel says, Dave, haven't you ever noticed we are the last to decide on any strategy and personnel? I have noticed, Daniel, and it's frustrating. As Darren can attest to, because I will complain to him online quite frequently.
Yes. Hey, that's part of being a fan, Dave. Got to complain.
And covering this team. Hey, I fell in love with this team when I was a kid, and I'm no longer that. And so I've covered this team for now decades. We're going on 3 decades apiece, commenting publicly on this team. You and I are, Darren. And
thanks for reminding me.
I know.
I'm getting old. Yeah.
But it's frustrating. It is. So, hey.
But yeah, that's our look at the offensive line. I think that the coaching hire is a pretty, well, of course it would be important anyway, but it seems like we are always dissatisfied with the Vikings offensive line, and
get it right for once.
Yeah. And we got to find a coach to bring out the best in the guys that we have, whoever they happen to be, and one that can identify talent, because they'll be involved in the free agent draft. Yeah.
Deal.
Yeah, we just it's
Don't leave it up to
something
Quasi.
But
I love
yeah,
Quasi. Love working his numbers. But he's either listening to the wrong people, which is possible, i.e., the new coaches, or his process for evaluating is just not up to snuff. He can work the numbers angles and let him do that.
Well, I think it's not want to stick with it too long, but I think his second in the guy below him on that, Ryan Grigson, is a former offensive lineman. I got to feel that Grigson has a big role in the offensive line evaluations, and you would think he'd have a big, a pretty large say and have quite a bit of influence on the Vikings offensive linemen that do get picked or brought in. So there again, if you're looking for a finger to point at as to why, talent wise, are we getting the are we getting the right guys? Grigson might be somebody who's you'd want to be pointing at and saying, is he identifying the right guys?
Oh, like I said, we want to know the process. Do the Thor Nystrom deal. Do the edit. Do the who is telling you to select these guys, and the ones that have failed consistently, find them a new job, either with another team or a new position on the Vikings. But the ones that are doing well, we'll keep those.
Mm-hmm.
It's real simple. It's not rocket science.
Sometimes we make it out to be, but yeah.
Yes, we do, but it isn't. Anyways, got any last words, everybody?
Cause and Effect's got a question about Mike McDaniels there. What seems to be wrong with him? Multiple teams waiting for a specific job. I would think that McDaniel.
He signed as the Chargers OC, and he's pulled out of some of the HC interviews,
which I find a bit strange, but maybe he feels he needs to take a step back, and that working under Harbaugh, who's usually going to have you in the mix in the playoffs, and working under Harbaugh and working with Justin Herbert and maybe getting him over the hump with the playoffs, maybe he feels that's a better way to build up his resume again and get and be one of the top candidates for a head coaching job than taking some of these interviews where you don't really have a good shot at it. Probably taking the same.
Or Buffalo was one of them. He may have seen Bean throw the dude under the bus and said, "Oop, not the place for me."
No, maybe not.
Or working with Josh, for that matter.
Yeah. Working with Josh Allen would be, should be pretty appealing to most everybody. But again, if you think the off the field stuff and you don't think you can work with Bean and you don't like the owner, then yeah, if you've got an option to be paid very well as an offensive coordinator and just on a team that's pretty good, that might be, maybe that's more appealing to McDaniel than going to Buffalo and where he doesn't like the situation.
Mm-hmm. And he's a California kid, so hey.
And he'd also be in Buffalo. He'd also be replacing a guy who's extremely, extremely popular as head coach in Sean McDermott. So maybe he also feels that this is a lose-lose situation for me. If I don't take him to the Super Bowl, I'm going to get hammered here.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see how it goes. All right there, folks. I want to thank you for watching and listening to us. You guys absolutely rock every week, and we appreciate it. Who have you got for today's game there, Darren?
Oh, I'm the same with you. I've got, not because I'm not the same. I got Pats, and I think the Rams are going to beat the Seahawks. I think Sam, unfortunately, is going to make that one or two mistakes, bad decisions that we see him make, and it's going to cost the Seahawks.
Interesting. Well, as Darren just said, I've got the Pats, and I'm going with the Seahawks. I'm going to root for Sam in the sea, and just to blow up Vikings Twitter even more. So we'll see.
Yeah, that would be one of the other benefits to Seahawks getting to the Super Bowl is to hear. You should give Sal Spice a call if that happens.
We should have her on. All right, buddy. What do we say?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby, and thanks everybody for watching.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!